Hi guys, welcome to the first of all the histology lectures. So in this lecture, we're going to focus on cells going from cells into tissues. And this slide kind of shows an overview of it all. So on this slide, we have let me get this working. A cell right here. Right? This is a goblet cell in simple columnar tissue, okay? But so there's a goblet cell, and a bunch of them all link together and form this tissue right here, okay? And that's simple columnar. And then simple columnar is found in this organ, and it's all in here on this free space is where you find that simple columnar. And that organ right there is part of the digestive system, right? So we're going to talk about that in more detail. So for cell diversity, cells are different. All cells are different, and the different cells have to come together to make these organs, right? So cells that cover and line body organs are going to be epithelial cells. They're going to be packed closely together, like this one over here. So there's not a lot of space between the cells, and they have fibers that are going to resist tearing or pulling. So they're going to line all of our organs and cover all of our body. And then we have cells that move organs or body parts. So this is going to be internal and external movement that they do. We talked about that last chapter. And these would be our muscle cells. And here's our muscle, right? So skeletal and smooth muscle cells are going to move our whole body. They move things through the digestive system. They're going to make us actually physically move. And then we have cardiac muscle, which is in our heart, which moves the blood through our body. We also have cells that store nutrients, and here's an example over here, fat cells. So fat cells are going to store liquid droplets of oil in their cytoplasm, right? And that's nutrients that we take when we run out of energy. Next, we have cells that fight diseases. So macrophages are going to be a type of cell here that are found in your blood, and they're going to actually eat or ingest microorganisms that are found in your blood. And we have cells that gather information. That would be nerve cells. There's a picture of one down here. And they're going to transmit and receive messages throughout the whole body. That keeps you responding to the environment. And lastly, you have cells that are going to be used for reproduction. So in females, you have oocytes, which are going to be the largest cells in the body, and they divide once they're fertilized, and they become an embryo. And then you have sperm for males, which are small. They don't have a lot of information within them. They just actually have DNA, and they swim. That's what they're built for. So they're going to swim so that they can reach the egg and fertilize the egg. So now that we know that there are different types of cells in our bodies, we know that our cells are going to come together and form tissues. So tissues are going to be groups of cells with a similar function and structure. There are 4 types of tissues we're going to talk about in this unit. So the first one, which we're going to focus on this week and next week, is epithelial. Epithelial tissue is going to cover our body surfaces. We have connective tissue, which will support our body. We'll mention that a little bit this week too. Muscle tissue, which moves the body inside and out, like I had said earlier, and then nervous tissue, which controls the body. So epithelial tissue, locations, and general function. So we're going to cover the body and line the body with epithelium. So this is going to cover your body surfaces inside and outside. So for the outside, our skin, this is epithelium. Anything that touches air is going to be epithelium. This is epithelium, right? Epithelium. If we open our mouths, the inside of our mouths are epithelium because that touches air also, right? All of your digestive tract, the inside is lined with epithelium. So that's going to be your internal covering. And those hollow spaces are called lumen. So if we have our stomach, right, kind of looks like this. Our stomach kind of looks like this. This open space inside is called the lumen. That's the place where all the food goes. So that, the inside of it, is lined with epithelium. All right, let me erase that for you because that's going to get in the way. The function of this epithelium is protection. So it provides a barrier so that bacteria can't enter our body. It also protects you from abrasion. So like the rubbing, like skinning your knees and stuff like that, that's epithelium that protects you. For protecting against abrasion on the inside, our epithelium is able to produce serous fluids. We talked about that last week when we did the membranes. That's the in between your serous membranes. Remember we talked about parietal and then visceral membranes, and then inside serous fluid, and how that fluid plays a role in lubricating so that like when you breathe it doesn't hurt, right? Those are epithelial tissues. Epithelial membranes also line body cavities that are open to the air, like we said earlier, and those ones that line like our mouths inside of your esophagus are called mucous membranes because they actually produce mucus. Another location or function for epithelial tissue is glandular tissue. This would be the fact that epithelial tissue makes up glands, and the glands are going to secrete substances, things like digestive juices. The function of epithelial, in general, all epithelial tissue is going to either protect, absorb, filter, or secrete, depending on the different types. There's some key characteristics of epithelial tissue that you need to know to be able to decide that it's epithelial tissue. First is that your cells fit closely together and form sheets lots of times. So if we look at these cells, right, there's no space between one cell and the next, right, on all of these. They have an apical surface, which is the surface that faces the free space, the top of it. So this surface here and this surface here are your apical surfaces. So this is always going to face free space. The bottom of the tissue is going to rest on a basement membrane. It's called the basal surface of the tissue, and it makes up the basement membrane. That basement membrane is actually going to then connect to connective tissue. So there'll be connective tissue. This pink right here represents connective tissue underneath. Epithelial is avascular, meaning it does not have a blood supply directly to it. Everything is going to diffuse from the connective tissue underneath. That's why you can like pull off layers of skin and it doesn't bleed right away. And epithelial tissue is going to regenerate easily, so it grows easily. You can get new skin, right? You skin your knee, more skin forms. Okay. When we classify our epithelial tissue, we use two different things. First, we use the number of layers. So if you have one layer, it's called simple. If you have more than one layer, it's called stratified. Think of that as like almost like stripes, multiple layers, right? The second thing we use is the shape of the cells. So if you have squamous cells, they're going to kind of look like eyeballs. They look a little bit like this. Then the next one comes down, and then we have one here. All right, fish scale is how your book says. I feel like they look like eyeballs. You could say fish scale. It's up to you. But those are squamous cells like that. These pictures are both squamous cells. They're flattened and look like fish scales. You can also have cuboidal cells. These are going to be squarish. They're not perfectly square, but the width and the length are kind of the same. So they look like this. And there's a nuclei in each one. Those are cuboidal cells. And then you have columnar cells, which look like this. And they have nuclei like this. Okay, so when we name them, we take a number, well, like name from each category. So first, the number of layers, and second, the shape. So you can have simple squamous, you can have simple cuboidal, you can have simple columnar, or you can have stratified squamous, stratified cuboidal, or stratified columnar. Make sense? So it always has two names. Always two names. Always two names. Okay, or two parts to the name. Lastly, this is going to show us the different functions based on their classification, because just depending on how it's classified, no matter where that tissue is found, it usually performs a similar function. So your squamous, if it's only one layer, so if it's simple squamous, it's going to be used for diffusion or filtration, and secretion if it's in the serous membrane, because it's going to produce that serous fluid. If it's more than one layer and it's squamous, it will always be for protection. All right. Cuboidal and columnar, when they're in a single layer, they're going to be used for secretion or absorption. If they're ciliated, they're going to move stuff, so propel things or move things. The cilia just kind of wave and push stuff around. If they're multiple layers, they're also going to be used for protection. They are very rare in humans. We don't actually study the multiple layer, just know cuboidal and columnar, if it's stratified, will be protection. And then transitional is only in more than one layer. So transitional cells are going to be for protection. So they're going to stretch to accommodate an increased amount of fluid. Okay, so that's this lecture. Couple questions coming up about lecture. Answer those quickly, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.